G'day, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're here with the one and only Jammal. So Joel has been speaking about important issues in our nation for quite some time, and he's not that long ago teamed up with Turning Point USA, a huge group over obviously in the United States to start the Australian chapter, I believe. Joel, thank you for coming on. Now, Joel, first question I've got for you today is obviously everyone wants to know what happened with Donald Trump Jr. recently. So for those of you who don't know out there, Donald Trump Jr. was supposed to be here for a speaking tour, but the government, I believe, was playing funny buggers with his visa application. So shed some light on this for us, mate.
It's not the first time they've done this. They did this with Nigel Farage when we brought him out in September last year. The government were very much dragging their feet on the visa, but essentially they really would. You're meant to know where you stand on a visa, especially with a high-profile person.
The president's son.
The president's son.
What does that say for us as a nation, especially if Donald Trump Sr. ends up becoming the 47th president?
It's a point that we should hammer the Labor Party on. The fact that, if this was Hunter Biden, if this is Taylor Swift, oh, no worries. Within a week, the turnaround's great. But they had this since May. Up to 6 weeks or more, they were sitting on this application and we didn't know where it stood. And so the real question is, why is that the case? Are you trying to, not only are they trying to ban us on free speech, which I'm sure we'll talk about later with the misinformation bill, but on top of that, when we try to bring international speakers that are respected and have been here before, like Nigel Farage, former European Union Member of Parliament, and the former the former president's son of one of our closest allies, it begs the question: why is this going on? Why is our government trying to protect us? Why are they acting like our parents, just like during the lockdown days?
Government overreach is what I can see there. Now, funny that you should mention that. Now, Donald Trump Jr., he's obviously a conservative figure. Someone who espouses conservative, pro-America first values, kind of like how I espouse, pro-Australia first values here in Australia. Now, I am certain that had he been a left-leaning speaker, he would have been approved straight away for his visa, and he wouldn't have had to go through all these jumps and hoops. Yeah. Would you share that sentiment?
Totally agree. I mean, it was only a couple months ago that former President Obama was here. The big thing that they're worried about with Trump Jr. from the commentary I've seen online from MPs is the fact that, he's an election denialist. He's he had something to do with January 6th. It's like, hang on a sec. If he does, then, and I disagree with that assessment, then there's more evidence to say his father does. And I disagree with that assessment as well. But are you telling me that if Donald Trump becomes the president in 2024, you would reject his access to Australia? I mean, this is lunacy. We're on the brink of war with China, on a knife's edge with Taiwan. Australia is a proxy military base, and you want to neglect us, that sort of our longest sort of military protection with America. This is nuts.
It is absolute madness. Now, Joel, let's break away from the seriousness for a little bit, and let's get into a bit of your background. Obviously, forgive me for saying, but you look like an immigrant. I'm an immigrant myself, so, we're not politically correct over here on the Senator Babet show. Yeah. So where were you born? And were you born here?
Yeah, I was born here. Southwest Sydney, Western Sydney, Parramatta. Lived there my whole life. My dad, he moved here from Lebanon when he was 4, but he's technically Syrian. That's how, because his father was Syrian, that's how it works over there. But my mum was born here, but her parents are Lebanese. So for simplicity, I tell people I'm half Lebanese, half Syrian.
Makes sense. So do you speak any other languages apart from English?
Look, I speak a little bit of Arabic. When I was younger, I was learning how to speak fluently and write, but I've lost that since then. But I do. But my heart is very much with Middle Eastern, Southwest, and Western Sydney, especially during the lockdowns.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But yeah, that's where I come from.
Legend. So before you became involved in politics, what was Joel Jammal up to? What was he doing?
I was having a great time working in the construction and property development industry. I worked in the industry during school, during my holidays, when I left school, during my degree. I ended up taking off my blue collar job and eventually started doing my white collar job when I finished my property economics degree. But I always had an interest in politics. I was always listening to podcasts online just for fun. But yeah, I mean, in mid-2020, I lost my job due to the lockdowns because the government had other plans for all of us, and so I was made redundant due to the lockdowns, and I
So you
started.
thought, that's it, I'm going to get actively involved and get my hands dirty and try and change the country for the better.
Pretty much.
And here you are today.
Jordan Peterson, he gave me a great rule in 2019, a year before the lockdown started. He said in his new book, where responsibility's been abdicated, opportunity lurks. And if you don't seize that opportunity, the totalitarians will. And so I saw a lack of responsibility being filled by the media, so I tried to replace the media. And to date, I've been fairly successful with that. 50 million views in the last 3 years. And then the other aspect is the politicians that were goaded into this by the media and the fear that was created. I vowed to get more people elected, so I started working a bit with Craig Kelly, some of the 10 freedom parties in the federal election and the state elections. In the last 15 months, we've fought 4 elections.
You've carved quite a niche for yourself as a bit of a wheeler and dealer in the background of conservative minor party politics at the moment. And that's actually been very impressive to watch, because I watched you come up on social media, some kid online, you're talking about politics, and here you are today sitting in my Senate office, and you were part of the group that enabled me to be elected today. So obviously, thank you for that, and I'm sure everyone else thanks you as well.
It's my audience. That's where the power comes from, and my loyalty is to my audience, and obviously my community, Parramatta, Western Sydney, but the real power of where I derive it from is from my audience, because they thrive off authenticity. That's what they're looking for. Any politician coming up on the right or the left, authenticity is the key.
Yeah.
And so I've always said this, the day I stop being transparent with my audience is the day I'm done.
Yeah.
And so it really is, I owe it to them, and I owe it to, the lessons that my parents taught me, my school taught me, and the opportunities Australia's given me. And so it's up to me to now give it back.
Yeah.
And say, okay, I want us to all have kids that have the same opportunities.
Absolutely. So I've obviously watched you come up through social media, which is how you initially built your following. And now we're being faced with this misinformation and disinformation bill from the Labor Party, where essentially, for those that don't know what the bill is, the government and the bureaucracy behind the government will be able to say, hey, this thing that you've posted up or you've put in a podcast or on a website or wherever it is, we deem this to be misinformation or disinformation. And because we've deemed it so, this now must be deleted. And they can force social media companies to remove that content from the internet or censor it. Now, this is obviously, I don't have to explain to people at home how dangerous this is, giving the government bureaucracy full control over what is and what is not misinformation, because like we know earlier in their pandemic, they were saying that things like ivermectin was horse paste, whereas we know now that ivermectin can actually help people that have COVID when used in combination with other drugs. So what do you think the future would look like for Australia should the Labor Party be successful in passing this misinformation or disinformation bill? Do you think it's dangerous to our democracy?
The purpose of elections and the purpose of free speech is to release tension and pressure from the bottle of our country. Mm-hmm. No one has had the guts to say this yet, because I think they're worried about being done for incitement. If we do not have free speech, this is what Jordan Peterson said, then all that's left is violence. No one here in this room wants that. No one wants that. We need a world where we can express our views, especially minorities, and allow us to build momentum to publicly bring about change through the democratic process, through votes. That's what I wheel and deal with. That's what you're doing in Parliament. You're here to represent people's concerns. But if people feel like they don't have control over the kids' education, over where their money's spent through taxation, if their public servants are no longer serving them and instead dictating to them through the Misinformation Act, I fear what comes next. I really do. I've been in front of the madness of crowds before. Mm-hmm. I understand how easy it is for things to go out of control. And people will get violent, and I completely condemn it, but I understand it. And I'm worried that if the government goes down this road, no one has said this yet, violence, as Jordan Peterson says, is often the thing that ends up happening if they can't speak, especially if they can't eat. That is one of the, I think there's some stat out there, 30 to 40% if 30 to 40% of the household budget is dedicated towards feeding the family, that is actually rife for a violent revolution. No one here wants to see that, and the government needs to seriously consider, if you clamp down on free speech to the point that we can't relieve pressure out of democracy, Australia's going to be, it's not going to be Australia anymore.
No, absolutely. You're completely right. And what scares me the most about this bill is I talk about this sometimes with the duopoly that we're in right now, the Lib-Lab duopoly. So obviously this bill now is being introduced by the Labor Party as it stands now, but the idea for this bill was actually put up by the Liberal Party last year under the Morrison government. So, this just goes to show that, both major parties, I believe, are compromised, and we really need other genuine options out there. We need parties like mine and other minor parties to really keep these guys accountable. Next question I'd like to ask you, Joel, is Turning Point. So obviously you started the Australian chapter of Turning Point Australia.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about Turning Point USA, and then tell us about your role here in Australia with Turning Point Australia. So who started Turning Point?
So Charlie Kirk, he started Turning Point USA in the universities specifically. He recognised that they're the factory of all bad ideas.
They really are, aren't they? That's where all the bad ideas come from.
It's nuts. And the idea was that the bad ideas would be contained in the universities, but that's not what's happened. It's rolled out in, the creative arts, in Hollywood.
Everywhere.
In education. All teachers are sent there. All teachers teach your kids. Even priests go to some universities to get educated as well.
Or indoctrinated. Depends how you want to look at it. I think indoctrinated, but anyway.
It's the long march through the institutions. That's what that phenomenon is called. Antonio Gramsci, he recognised that you can't just seize the power of the state through the police and the military and the government. You actually have to capture the mind of the country.
The mind of the people, the minds of the populace, the minds of the youth.
Exactly.
Because that's how you gain control over time.
Exactly.
By implanting what you want into the minds of the children, and they will go on to be the leaders of the future, and they'll enact whatever plans you put in their heads.
100%. And so the Turning Point USA, they have quite aptly recognised that. So I think 10 or 11 years ago, they started, and Charlie, he never went to university, but he was on the campuses making the case. I do believe today they've got something crazy like 3,000 campus chapters across the entire United States, and they're actively working to change that and to oppose that. They are one of the best. They have one of the best ground games in America in helping President Trump and with his re-election, but also whichever the Republican candidate is to beat Joe Biden. And in Australia, we do a very similar sort of thing with a slight change. We break stories that aren't being broken by the mainstream media. We provide commentary when it's needed and truth-telling when it's needed.
Absolutely.
We provide support with protests and political activism, provide a funnel, but most importantly, we give people advice on how best to make their vote count at elections. And that's how we've come with so many different freedom politicians to advocate for our audience.
Now, you mentioned just then making your vote count and being active in the political process. I actually think that half the reason why we're in the position that we're in as a nation today, with all the authoritarian behaviour that we're seeing from our government, is because the average person at home is not taking enough of an interest in who governs them and who's on the ticket, and who ends up going to Parliament, be it federal or state, to represent them. Would you say that the average person at home, and I think I know what you're going to say, needs to be more active in the political process?
100%. It goes back to that rule from Jordan Peterson I said before, where responsibility has been abdicated, opportunity lurks. And if you don't seize that opportunity, the totalitarians will. We have had in this country of Australia, before COVID, 30 years of uninterrupted economic growth.
Yep.
Our parents, they hate me saying this, but we've got to recognise what's gone wrong in order to move forward productively. I'm not blaming you, but this is what's happened. Under the watch of the baby boomer generation, they enjoyed 30 years of uninterrupted economic growth. They got their house, they settled in, maybe some of them were as successful as getting their own yacht. And the problem is that if you also don't pay attention to the political sphere, then those weasels in the cultural Marxist movement.
I like that word, the weasels.
Yeah, but
that's a good word.
They're weak.
It's what they are. They're weasels.
They are your inferiors. They really are. They haven't done anything brave. They've often lived on the public teat. Some of them university professors, some of them working on the public dime. And they have taken over your country with your vote and with your taxes, have weaponized it against your interests. They have stolen your kids. They are about to steal your land rights. They are about to steal your voice and your vote and your ability to voice concerns. This is where things are going in Australia and the Anglosphere. And as you said, absolutely, we need more civic engagement.
Yeah.
People need to join a political party. People need to understand who they're voting for and not just treat it as a ritual of
Not just
you
tick
rock
the
up.
box and then they just leave and have a snag and off they go home.
And so we're here
the right way to do it.
when it comes to elections, and that's probably the most important thing we do, we provide people with information like the policy matrix. These are my values. You know, where does a party stand on abortion? Where do they stand on free speech, on lockdowns, and on all that sort of stuff, and economic policy, and where do they land? And so that's what we're here for: transparency, authenticity, and making a difference tangibly.
Fantastic. Now, question: if given the opportunity, who would you most like to interview? Anyone in the world, living or dead?
Oh, living or dead?
Living or
wow,
dead.
that's actually a tough one.
But let's start with living first.
Okay.
I can tell you who I'd like to interview, and that's President Trump and Governor DeSantis.
I'll tell you why I wouldn't want to interview those two. I like them, but the problem is they are in America. It's very tough to be authentic because everything gets taken out of context. I think it would be a fascinating discussion. Don't get me wrong, but I think you would get a stock standard answer that's very prim and proper. But it would be fascinating. I would actually prefer to interview someone like Peter Hitchens in the UK. He's actually one of the people that got me off my butt to do
be more
something.
involved. Yeah.
I've found that over the last probably 5 years that the people that really got me going were the ones that said it's all over. Like it's done. There's nothing you can do, Joel, that can change things, because it made me want to prove them wrong.
That's right, yeah.
But often I found that they've got a morsel of understanding that I don't have on politics. He said in 2018 to our former Deputy Prime Minister, John Anderson, he was the Deputy Prime Minister under John Howard, he said, there's no hope at all, you know, where's the Christian movement? Where is the revival? Where is the taking back of our institutions? It's non-existent.
Yeah.
You know, it's basically over, we're all done, we're just managing the decline of Rome. And that was heartbreaking. I didn't sleep for 2 weeks. Yeah, I took it hard, Ralph, I really did. And I wasn't even in politics at that stage. And it got me off my butt. And I was like, you know what?
How many years ago was this?
This is 2018.
2018, so not that long ago, 5 years ago.
Not that long ago, yeah.
What about someone who's passed away? Who would you like to interview?
I mean, you've got to want to interview Jesus. I mean, as a Christian,
I didn't think you'd say that.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
look, either him or Machiavelli. I think he'd be fascinating, author of The Prince. He's got a lot of wisdom as well. Yeah, I don't know. I think there's so many people I'd love to interview historically.
All right, next question. So if there was a bill that you could introduce tomorrow, click your fingers, bang, the bill's introduced, what would it be in federal parliament?
It'd be the opposite of the Misinformation Act.
It'd be free speech.
Because if you can't speak, you can't fight for anything. So whether you believe in, abortion or not, just for example, if you can't speak about that particular topic, you're stuffed. Any topic, literally any topic, if you can't speak, you're stuffed. And so it's something that enshrines free speech in a way that doesn't restrict it, but also doesn't allow for the incitement of violence.
Absolutely,
or,
of course. Yeah.
And I mean physical violence, not what the
Not
left calls.
words of violence, actual violence.
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, I would have to agree with you. I mean, we really do need some form of a Bill of Rights where certain rights are enshrined that can never be taken away by the government, because I guess people in Australia have had a very safe upbringing, and we've been taught to think that the government would never do anything bad to us. But COVID has really shown us that they can, and if given half a chance, they will.
Yeah, we actually tried to put something forward like that. Craig Kelly, when I did a bit of work for him in early 2021, before it was cool, to be in the movement. I was with him there in the office when he was copying all the slings and arrows, and he asked me to look at the Tennessee bill, freedom of speech, the Florida bill, the Polish bill for freedom of speech online, and try and adapt it for Australia. And he did a good job of that, but obviously we didn't have the numbers to get it passed.
Course, yeah.
So we need more Craig Kellys, we need more Ralph Babets.
We need more of us in there.
We need more Pauline Hansons and Antics and Rennicks, and that's what we need to get this done.
Speaking of Senator Rennick, that you've brought him up, for those of you at home that aren't aware, Senator Jared Rennick has not secured pre-selection for the next election. Thoughts on that? Thoughts on the LNP overall? Thoughts on the direction of the of the centre right? Tell me. What's on your mind about Rennick?
I'll tell you what's heartbreaking about this. So Senator Rennick has the largest
Social media following online, huge.
in the Liberal Party.
Yeah, massive.
Other than Scott Morrison, who's about to leave.
More than Peter Dutton.
More than Peter?
By a lot, actually.
I think it was 240,000 on Facebook. Now, for the Americans listening, you're like, it's nothing.
Yeah.
In Australia, we're 25 million people. That's one of the biggest accounts. And the man, there's a page on Twitter that tracks this every day. He's usually in the top 10 every day of politicians with his posts and his reach. Senator Rennick lost his spot because we stopped getting involved in politics. Many people left the Liberal Party in Queensland. And the challenge with that is if you do not vote in the Liberal Party in order to get him pre-selected, then you'll lose him. He's gone. And there's a version of this. This is a very complex concept, but this is the problem. People need to understand this because this is how the left-wingers know the rules. And they take advantage of them. They have infiltrated the Liberal Party, the party of Menzies, the party that the UAP used to be.
That's right.
And they've taken it over. They've strayed from the We Believe statement. But there is a version of the future where people join a political party like the Liberal Party. They vote to secure people like Senator Rennick, Senator Antic. But then when the general election comes around, they vote for Senator Babet, Senator Pauline Hanson, Senator Malcolm Roberts in the minor parties. What we can't do is get a senator up in every state for the minor parties, but then assume that the Liberals are just going to always be there with us. We can only ever get one senator up in every state for the minor parties.
For now.
For now. But I think that the way the rules are stacked right now and the time frame, I really think that we need to get people into the Liberal Party and into the minor parties and to actually reinvigorate it. Because the establishment. How are we going to oppose this misinformation bill? That's probably the best example.
It's going to be tough because, it's obviously being put up by the Labor Party, but they almost always have the support of the Greens. And all they need after that is the support of 2 crossbenchers, and the bill's a done deal. And this is we don't have the numbers.
And this is the thing. We might peel away one Greens senator, like Senator Lydia Thorpe, because she's having a rough time with Bant right now.
Yep.
And also David Pocock. But they've got 2 Liberals they could very easily get to vote across just on this bill.
Yep.
This is the problem. The Liberal and this is why I came to this realisation, mid last year. The Liberal Party and the Labor Party teamed up to make the Liberal Democrat Party change their name.
Yep.
They annihilated them with legislation. They mandated a use of language in a political party. Like these parties have become so entrenched with funding, because we have publicly funded elections, with legislation.
That's right.
They even want to add more senators. That's how entrenched the parties are. So if there's no takeover over the establishment parties, and if we don't have minor parties to keep them honest,
keep them accountable. That's right.
And it's not a something that hasn't been done before. In the left, they have the Labor Party, and then they have the Greens to drag the Labor Party kicking and screaming to a climate change agenda.
Yeah.
Similarly, we need freedom candidates and members of Parliament
like mine to pull the Liberal Party
them, yeah.
back to conservative, traditional Australian values. We absolutely do need that, and that's something that I'm working very intensely on at the moment. So tell me, what's the biggest issue that you think at the moment is facing our nation, Australia, just here? Us.
It depends what we hit first. Freedom of speech is obviously the biggest one.
Yep.
And then the other one is probably the voice, depending on which one's first. The voice of the Parliament, if it passes, is the most significant constitutional change our country has faced ever since its inception. We're only a young country, but this would breathe race back into the Constitution, and it would give Canberra...
It's absolutely crazy.
It's nuts.
To put race back into it, where we can say, hey, based on the colour of your skin, based off your background, we're going to treat you differently or give you certain rights and privileges that someone else is not going to get because they're a different colour than you. That's essentially what it is at its most basic level. It's
nuts. And word of encouragement, though, I don't think it's going to pass. But the biggest threat to this passing isn't the yes side. It's the people not voting side. If our side doesn't show up, like in Sydney, for example, New South Wales, we've got about a 16% invalid vote rate. No vote rate. So people either not voting, or they're not registered to vote, or they're turning up and they're deliberately screwing up their ballot or messing up their ballot.
Just go in, check off your name and
900,000 voters.
Yeah.
Ralph, that is one you. Like, that is one senator in the most populous state. That's
crazy.
4 Mark Lathams.
Yeah.
Like, if we lose this vote, it'll be because we didn't show up. And that's the story of history. You know, if an empire is going to collapse, it's because it didn't pass, you know, the strength test.
Yeah.
And so if we lose this, you know, blip in history, which is freedom and freedom to provide for our kids and thrive economically, it's our own fault.
Yeah. So let's change the direction and get a little bit lighter here. What does Joel Jammal like to do when he's not commenting on politics, which obviously you do a lot?
I love I really love fishing. I love
Fishing?
I love 4-wheel driving. You know, some of my fondest memories were doing that on the beach. Yeah.
You find actually you can still get out there now with
I don't
all
have
the work that you're doing? No.
I don't have time. I haven't been able to fish in 3 years. It's been terrible. I tried to take some time off in 2022 in January, and I took a few days off, and then the next thing I know, Old Parliament House is in flames, and the anti-terror, you know, federal police are going after.
They're going after them, yeah.
They're going after not just them. These were the Aboriginal sort of groups, but they were tying it to the freedom movement. And if they could make that tie, then they could come after all of us. And that was what I feared. But one of the other things I really enjoy doing, I'm trying to keep it light, is I actually loved when I was in university and on the construction site listening to podcasts and politics and self-improvement. I love gaming, massive gamer. I love chess.
Bit of a nerd?
Yeah, a bit of a nerd. I love playing chess physically. I love history. I love.
Are you a good chess player?
I'm all right. Not as good as Mr. Tate, our friend Mr. Tate, but no, yeah, I really do enjoy that. But yeah.
What about travel? Have you done much travel around the world?
Little bit. I've when I was in school, I completed my Gold Duke of Edinburgh award.
By the way, you're quite young, aren't you?
I'm 26. Yeah. I turned 26 this year. I've done New Caledonia, so that was fun.
Nice.
Sailed a catamaran there with some blokes. I've done Lebanon for a week. I've done Egypt for a wedding for a week.
Would you say that you're more of a beach person or like a city person
Yeah.
or like a forest type of person when it comes to holidays
beach,
and places
man.
you want to spend time?
Beach, and this is the thing. Australia's got the best beaches. You know,
Yeah.
I love holidaying in northern New South Wales along the beaches. You know, you go, you drive your car onto the beach, 4-wheel drive it. You know, there's no one along the coast. Not Bondi. Like we're talking
Bondi.
here.
Yeah, Bondi.
You know, we're talking 9 k's of beach. There's like maybe 2 cars. You 4-wheel drive on, park where you want, throw your rod in the water into a gutter. You know, pull out a massive fish, literally chuck it straight on the barbie because you can bring it onto the beach and enjoy it until the night and have a bonfire and do what you want. I miss it.
Joel, thank you so much for coming on the Senator Babet Show. You're a legend. Keep doing what you do, and I look forward to following you across all your social media networks.
Now, God bless you, and thank you for your service. And I pray that everyone listening to this conversation shares it because this censorship bill's it's going to smash us. And the best way you can stay in contact with Ralph, even if this passes, is by email. So please subscribe to his emails.
The check's in the mail. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I'll catch you next time. God bless you. God bless our nation. I'm Senator Ralph Babet.
Yeah, that's my kind of party. The United Australia Party. So sound the starting gun. You know we've just begun to make Australia great. We've got it in us, mate. United Southern.